one thing that you probably are all interested in that I'm going to talk about is Seafarers Access, which our office is shepherding that rulemaking through. And so that's the last slide of my presentation, just to make sure that you pay attention to the rest. So in the bio, I don't think he mentioned it, but somebody noticed that I grew up in South Dakota. And so, as Admiral Busby said, his first breath of air was salt air. My first breath of air was of cow manure. And so when I came into the Coast Guard, South Dakota was the only state that did not have a Coast Guard unit in it. And so I thought, to get away from this lonesome farm out on a tractor in the middle of a field, I needed to do something. And so the Coast Guard was the way that the path that I took. And so it's, I think about it now, and it is maybe a little bit about like being at sea. You're out, nothing around, it's boring, but it's peaceful when you're, of our age now. When you're 18 years old, it's not quite as pleasurable. The other thing that I really enjoy being here is that it's such a welcoming environment. It's certainly a lot of the audiences and conferences and stuff that I go to. Not that they're not welcoming me there, but I think every person that I've talked to here has had a relationship with their Coast Guard counterparts within their port area, and so I think that's another reason why I just love our service so much, is that we enjoy such a great relationship with the Seamen's welfare organizations, and certainly throughout the years, I certainly have enjoyed that relationship and what you do for the mariner. As many of you know, we had a commandant change of command in early June this year, and so Admiral Carl Schultz is our new commandant. His watchwords were ready, relevant, and responsive. I think ready is a pretty, logical, in that our motto is Semper Paratus, which is always ready. And so it's more than just a motto, though. It's actually our core purpose. The relevant piece, I think, is very, I think goes to what my office is attempting to do, and that's to ensure that we have a marine transportation system that's vibrant and supporting the amount of economic activity that happens in this nation is based on us being relevant with the industry and making sure that we're being kind of the common sense regulator, which I think we enjoy that experience, especially amongst DC entities. A lot of people have, I guess we're fortunate we have a favorable reputation there. And the last is responsive, and that's just going beyond that bias for action and actually taking charge, as we saw in the hurricane season last fall, and our ability to exercise on-scene initiative to kind of just take charge at no matter what your pay grade. And so it certainly is a great time in the Coast Guard. So my office, it's Office of Port and Facility Compliance, a couple of different divisions within that, and if you remember the clip that showed the ship that was detained here in Baltimore, our Cargo and Facilities Division Chief just reported in a couple of weeks ago, Chuck Bright. He was the Prevention Department head here in Baltimore, and so he was the coastie that you saw in there, and when I told him that I was coming up here to speak, he said, well, definitely make sure you look out for Reverend Mary. And so it was interesting to see Reverend Mary being the chair of the first set of panel members. So thank you very much for your service, Reverend Mary. And he said I definitely needed to hook up with you and have you say a prayer over me. I guess maybe he's only been there 2 weeks, but he knows me well. So, and then Tim Grant, who is a former prevention department head out in the Port of Los Angeles, Long Beach. And so all these other folks, they're working, a lot of good policy work, but all came from the port communities, and probably some of you recognize their names as they're kind of the future leadership of our organization within the marine safety community. A couple of big things that we end up working on in the domestic ports division is, everybody has this, you can't go anywhere without talking about cyber. And so one of the things that Admiral Paul Thomas, who was our Assistant Commandant for Prevention Policy prior to our current one, who's Admiral John Netto, said, we're looking at cyber as just an additional operational risk that the maritime industry knows how to manage. And so that's what kind of the mantra and that we've taken, in that we're looking at this from a cyber risk management perspective, not a cyber security issue. And then the other thing that we do with that is involved in our partnerships that we have at the Area Maritime Security Committees. And I'm maybe probably not the focus really of what you do, but I know that because you're involved so much within your port communities, some of you may even sit on some of these Area Maritime Security Committees. And so I think the relationships that you build through those committees are beneficial because, certainly, the facility operators are involved in those, and that just goes that much further to getting to that Seafarer's Access piece and having relationships with your Coast Guard counterparts. The other thing that I've spent way too much time on the past couple of years is this Transportation Worker Identification Credential Reader rule. So the rule published about 5 weeks after I got into the job. I'm thinking, hey, this is great. The final rule is complete. I won't even have to deal with this. And then the last 2 years I've spent kind of backtracking, figuring out how we maybe didn't do such a great job. The bottom line on this one is that last bullet there, the TWIC Accountability Act of 2018, President Trump signed into law, basically preventing the Coast Guard from implementing any of this, these TWIC readers, which was supposed to start next Thursday. So I thought that I was away from it. I think it's just kicking the can down the road a little bit more, and we're going to do a lot more research on that. I think probably the other thing to mention is that we have a great relationship with our counterparts in TSA, who really are the administrators of the credential. And so I'm talking to them all the time. One of the new credential card is coming out here. They actually started printing them July 10th, so you'll probably see those start coming out. And certainly it's something that we got to continue working on. And I think the more that I'm able to interface with folks that have to deal with it, the better off I am as a regulator. And then the last one is this Seafarer's Access. And so certainly we understand that it's immensely important to you to make sure that we have this completed. And so I know you have a Coastie come, or at least try to come to your annual conference every year, and you're always kind of like, well, why is the final rule not published? And so I'm sure I don't need to tell you that the focus on current administration has been on regulatory reform. It's looking at taking regs off the books, not adding them. And so this reg still does stay on our unified agenda, with the Coast Guard's unified agenda, as one of our priority regulations. It's just that it obviously is going to take a little bit more time. I think when I first saw a similar slide to this, they kept on saying, well, we anticipate that it will be published, this rule. And so I say shortly. So shortly in my term in DC is that it will happen sometime in the future. I could tell you, I thought that we actually might have it across the finish line when I talked to Jason about 4 months ago, because that was how close I thought we were. And then about a month ago, my confidence started to diminish. And then about 2 weeks ago, and I got the feedback that the attorneys gave me, and I'm like, oh no, I'm definitely not getting across the finish line before this. But it certainly will happen in the future. I think that certainly we know it's a problem. But I think this is the positive that you have to look at that. All of those relationships that you have with your Coast Guard counterparts within the ports. I haven't had a Seafarer Access issue come up that we couldn't solve with almost a single phone call to the local Coast Guard office. And so that would be my message to you, is maintain those relationships, because while it's not a final rule yet, they know it's coming, the facilities do, and they'll be amending their facility security plans to accommodate. But when the captain of the port gets on the phone with a facility security officer, or the prevention department head does, they realize that, hey, yeah, we've got to make sure that we're making accountability, availability of access for our seafarers. And so I'll end with that, and certainly the other piece of it, it seems like everybody's got a good relationship within their Coast Guard port, but I also give Jason a list of all of our captain of the port zones, the current captain of the port, as well as the current prevention department head, which will be a kind of a reference for you. As you know, we change out every 2 to 3 years, and so it's a revolving door to maintain contact with that person within your port complex. I'm sure it's probably challenging, so certainly I'll provide that to him. So you have a ready available, at least the phone number shouldn't change. You may get a different commander or captain on the end of the line, but that's just your opportunity to make a new friend every time they change out. So with that, I'll happy to entertain any questions.
I'm sure there are some. So thank you so very much for this presentation, Captain Manning, that you've made your way all the way down from Washington to be with us here today. Questions? Yes, Reverend Mary gets pride of place, I think.
I noticed that your final slide bolded representatives for Seafarers Welfare or whatever, which is marvelous. But the problem in Baltimore is not particularly our getting in, although occasionally FSOs lose all the paperwork that says we could get in. Basically, we can get in. The seafarers can't get out of most of our terminals unless we escort them, which a $200,000 a year budget is impossible. A drop in the bucket, or unless they pay for very expensive private drivers. And that, with all due respect, is not a problem that has been solved with 1 or 2 phone calls.
Yeah, so Chuck is now in charge of that regulatory mission, and so it will be his. And from the first week is in the office, he's briefing Admiral Netto on, hey, in Baltimore we do have this, and he actually brought your issue up about, hey, they can only get so far onto the terminal, and then maybe they end up having to walk the rest of the way, or there's somebody brings up a safety or security issue about it. I'd say with the final rule publishing, there's going to be no way around that from them allowing access. And so certainly it's not like it's the second that rule publishes that it will be implemented, because there is a time frame in there where they have to revise their facility security plans and then start to operate. So I would say we're definitely closer to that problem being solved than we were 4 years ago when we published the NPRM.
What's the time frame that you mentioned?
So like I said, I can't control how it's in its final stages at Coast Guard headquarters, but it has to clear through the department as well. And so as you can imagine, the department's focus right now on a lot of the regulatory piece of it is on immigration issues. And so it takes a backseat to that. It still is on our unified agenda for the Coast Guard, and is on our priorities list for our reg project. So
I'm sorry, what I meant was the regulation has been written.
Yes.
In that regulation, how much time does it allow for a new FSP to be written?
So in the NPRM, I think that we said 9 months. It's going to be somewhere in that general time frame. I mean, it's not. I'm not going to give you the exact because it's not finalized. I don't know what the final number will come out as, but it's somewhere in the year to 18-month time frame where that entire process will have taken place. Part of that too was because we have a limited workforce to review all these facility security plans that come in. We can't, say, you know what, revise all your facility security plans and send them into the a number of folks that we have reviewing those to be able to get them approved in a timely fashion. So, but we were 8 years away from the Auth Act that required us to do this. So I'm pretty, even though I'm not absolutely can't give you the 100%, I'm sure that we're going to get something here in the next few years. It's not going to be another 8 without you having something in the regs that says timely, no cost access will be afforded for all these seafarers. So,
thank you, Captain. I'm holding in my hand a Ports Authority Escort Agreement that we have to sign at the Port of Savannah. Myself and our volunteers, sometimes 10 to 15 times a day. And it basically says that any escorting violations that the Coast Guard might impose, we have to take the responsibility of accepting that fine. And it says here exactly $1,500 to $32,500, and MSU in Savannah has said that that $32,500 fine is going to be increased. We have not seen that.
Has been increased.
It has been?
It has, yeah. How many fines have you received in that?
None yet, because we have trained our volunteers very well.
Okay.
What are some of those escorting violations, and why a fine that high? We have lawyers on our board of directors who have asked 7 or 8 of our very good volunteers not to volunteer because they say it's absolutely stupid legally to sign this every 6 or 7 times a day, because you're putting your house in jeopardy, you're putting your response.
So I'll take a look at what you have there. My guess is what they're getting to is escort requirements for going into a secure area on a facility security, designated on a facility security plan without a TWIC and a reason to be there. So do you all end up getting transportation worker identification credentials, TWICs? You got them?
Everybody.
Or most people do, because it makes your job easier. That's usually what I'm just guessing, because that's the only place where we in our regulatory framework talk about escorting people, and that's within a secure area. Normally that's much closer to the ship. It's where you have basically maritime transfer happening rather than out towards the gate. But some facilities have chosen to have their entire facility footprint as a secure area. So in that case, you would need an escort from the gate to the ship, and so I'll take a look at your thing there. Also, like I said, you've got two of the alumnus from the Office of Port and Facility Compliance down there in Savannah, and Josh Rose is the XO, and Josie Long is your new prevention department head. So they definitely are friends of ours, and I'm sure that they'd be happy to take a look at this. Now, this is from a independent marine terminal operator, or is it the Port Authority, or whose declaration or thing is that? 2
of the 13 terminals we have in Savannah.
Okay, and Georgia Port Authority is an operating port down there, or are they land lease? Okay, all right, so they're the facility security plan holder, and so they should be really the person that, and it sounds like MSU is engaged on it, or hasn't. I mean, the citation they're giving you is a U.S. Code citation, and like I said, that's why I asked if anybody has ever actually received one, because it's easy to say, yeah, you could be fined up to this, but if you never have, maybe it's not something you should give too much worry to. So
We have, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Time for 2 more questions. I encourage you to perhaps speak directly with each other. Wayne LaBelle, and then the last question will be Bobby Fuller.
Yes, sir, Captain. Two things real quick. One of the issues that we face sometimes is that the seafarers get access to get outside, but some of the facilities are restricting that once they get to the gate. In other words, if we're not on a gate list from the ship, they will not let us transport. Now, if they got to give them free access to get outside, it's not free if they got to tell them who they got to go and where they got to go with. I don't know if there's something we can do to correct that. And secondly, even though these regulations haven't passed yet, from your side, if we could get you guys to at least talk to the facility personnel and say, listen, look, I know it's not written in law yet, but if you would just give a little bit more access to these guys and don't wait for the regulation to be posted, coming from you guys, it would definitely be a help for us.
Yeah, well, and that's why I said, reach out to the Captain of the Port, because besides Reverend Mary's, circumstance, all of the ones that have been come to my level, and I've called the Captain of the Port and said, hey, you got an issue in this port. That was the end of it, issue resolved. I don't think I quite understand the piece that you said. So they give them the access to get out the gate, but then you can't pick them up outside the terminal. So how can they control once they're outside the facility? So who is it controlling it? The terminal operator, or is it the? Okay, But if they're not on their facility, how can they control who they do go and don't go with?
How can we back that up to say, listen, these guys are free, you can't control that for that? You know?
Right, right.
Is there anything in writing that we can have with us to say that they have no authority once a person is off the facility on who they have to go with?
Yeah, what port are you in? Oh, okay, got it. And you're talking about on bulk liquid terminal, on oil terminal, or on dry cargo, or? Okay, it's 154 facility, yep. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how they can control it once they're off the terminal. I mean, how can they, I don't understand how the facility can have any control on that.
Ship register that doesn't list us as to be transported, but again, once they're free, they should be anything.
I agree. I don't think anything in the rule is going to change this issue that you're dealing with.
You can support us with a documentation that states that, hey, once a person is outside the gate, they can do whatever they want to do.
No, absolutely, yeah. So,
Last question, Bobby Fuller, 346.
okay.
Yes, sir. My question is this final rule goes to the facilities themselves, correct? The observation in my port is I think that our terminals are relying on Texas Port Ministry to be that shore
Person
access
yeah.
vehicle. And I'm with Mary, there is absolutely no way that we can provide 24-hour
right.
unhindered access. Nor do we, there's just no way we can do that. Now, does this rule put it on the facility to provide that escort service?
It does. And as you would imagine in the notice of proposed rulemaking had much of the same language in it. It's slightly modified in the draft that it is now. But a lot of this is going to come down to coordination with the Captain of the port on what is that no cost access. If somebody's going to pay for it, right? It's not going to cost the mariner anything, but how is that going to be resolved? It will be. I don't expect that it will be an easy nut to crack. So it's certainly it's a discussion with the Captain of the port. They're the ones that are approving the plan, and so they've got to provide their how they're going to do it, and it's not going to be able to say the Texas Maritime or Ministry Association. It's it's going to have some commercial entity identified. So, and I've got business cards. I'm happy to take yours too and try to answer any questions you have. Certainly know that.
Will you be able to stay with us for a
I'm
short
here the
time
rest
today?
of the day. So.
Excellent.
Yep.
So if you'll join me in thanking Captain Manning for his presentation.